Horror is not really a genre I've explored that much, outside of while horror is a mascot horror, which for the most part does target a younger audience than something like, I don't know, Scream. Never seen the movie and I don't really want to. Despite this lack of exposure to horror games, I did want to play at least some of the older ones, so I decided it would be fun to analyze how old horror games, most if not all, will be released before the Wii existed, and identify if they were actually scary. Starting with one of the first and most influential horror games, Resident Evil. The story is after some cannibalistic murders, a B team of government employees go to investigate. When contact with them is lost, the A team go to investigate. During the investigations, doggos attack, one dies, one escapes, and the rest take shelter in the mansion. The story, while it gets set up, didn't scare me. Throughout the game, you pretty much get told, oh yeah, they're making zombies here. And zombies, honestly, they aren't really that scary of a concept to me. Now, they used to scare the hell out of me. I had to sleep with a nightlight for like years because of a zombie Simpsons comic in Minecraft. Yeah, seriously, Minecraft made me believe zombies died in light, and the one comic scared me a lot, and I have no clue why. I was 5, leave me alone. Anyway, whilst the main plot about zombies and government forces teams all dying wasn't really that nerve-wracking, except the guy who died by a snake. That actually got me incredibly scared to continue exploring past the door. Also, because I'm Australian, snakes kill people here. Less people, more dogs, unfortunately. Also, just, I don't know, I wasn't scared. Setup for all the events, though, is honestly really great. You're basically stuck in this mansion in the middle of nowhere, which is a really great setting as it is a completely unknown place, which does help establish your fear of the unknown, which the game was good at utilizing. The fear of the unknown feels like the main thing that the game is trying to capitalize on with how the plot and game is structured with you exploring this mysterious mansion. The uneasiness of the environments and uncertainty of locations is really good setup for a horror game in my opinion. The transitions between the areas help reinforce the mysterious and unnerving atmosphere that is created. Transition screens just have everything despite the thing you're using to move between areas be a black void. Created some tenseness and is somewhat unnerving, especially when I had no clue was actually on the other side of a door. Whilst that may be unintentional, the descent of the elevator in this void is actually really unnerving to me due to my slight phobia of heights, which is honestly a great way to prey on already established real-world fears. However, in the version I played at least, you could skip the animations, which did dim the horror as you aren't required to watch it every time, but it was probably for the best as I can imagine it getting quite tedious due to how often you need to learn new areas in this game. Behind these doors and elevators there's a range of unnerving and whatever the opposite of unnerving is, rooms and hallways, which could have been a problem as I could tell which rooms were safe and which weren't by looking at them. However, the jump scare you get really early into a game helped to make each room have more uncertainty about whether they were truly safe. It made me a lot more paranoid during the initial exploration of the mansion due to the uneasiness caused by never knowing if there was a threat. It made me a lot more paranoid during the initial exploration of the mansion due to the uneasiness caused by never knowing if a threat was secretly hiding and just waiting for the right moment to jump. It also established a greater fear of the dogs, aside from the pre-existing Dark Souls trauma, due to the jump scare activating my flight instincts with how fast they are and they seemed like a genuine threat. However, as I explored the mansion for longer and was exploring the second floor, the anxiousness of entering new rooms dissipated as, aside from some loud crows, there weren't really any more jump scares with immediate threats. I could establish a pattern of halls being more zombie infested and rooms often not having any, and if they did, it was very few, so I started to get less scared due to the predictable nature of the layout. This was until I went outside. The initial run through the courtyard and the guardhouse were the most scared and anxious I felt during the game. Due to spending a couple hours in the house beforehand, the new environments completely alienated me. The two completely new environments really increased the fear I felt, especially when the primary enemy of a courtyard seemed to be the dogs, which I hadn't seen since the jump scare. The threat of the dogs made the initial navigation through the courtyard incredibly nerve-wracking, especially with the mini jump scare of snakes falling down from the trees, which, whilst they are pathetic when they actually land, made that little section somewhat tense for most of the game. Especially with the threat of poisoning, which the encounter with the big snake made me believe that poison killed you and fast. After beating the game, I'm not sure if it truly does kill you, but at the time it genuinely scared me. The guardhouse also made me unreasonably scared throughout. Oh my god. Okay. The unique set pieces and the warnings of the sentient killer plant made me uneasy throughout. I believe this is due to not seeing the plant for a while, and since the game establishes it as a pretty big threat, I had a general fear of it. It was up to my imagination to determine how horrific this thing is or how scary. The sights of the roots growing in the guardhouse basement also just really unnerved me from how just many there are and the thickness of the bundle. I was honestly terrified to go anywhere near it initially while the room was flooded. This little preview into the monster was incredibly effective at making me scared of this thing. However, after the guardhouse, pretty much all my anxiousness instilled by the game disappeared. The only time I got scared is when I got jump scared by a zombie I couldn't see in the final area. Oh, Farah! And a couple of specks of way smaller anxieties. This is because after the guardhouse, I found that there was no unknown to be scared by to anywhere near as large of an extent as the big plant. During the mansion's revisit when the green guys invade, I didn't have any fear when navigating through it again. I nearly immediately identified a pattern of where they were located, and it was just where the zombies were located previously. Which brings me to an issue with the game that really hampered the fear of the unknown. Backtracking. I found fairly often during my playthrough that I had to backtrack to previously explored areas to unlock a new door, or because it just turns out I didn't pick up an important item or just even died. The revisiting of past locations destroys a lot of the fear that I felt during this game. When you become more familiar with somewhere or one thing, it becomes less scary most of the time. Especially when it comes to fear of the unknown. So whilst the backtracking aspects are good, and I also quite liked it from a puzzle and gameplay perspective, as finding an item then knowing exactly where I needed to use it was quite satisfying. However, it unfortunately is at the detriment of the horror aspects. Familiarity of the mansion is also unfortunately affected by the new areas I discovered during the revisit. Whilst having a sliver of anxiousness associated with them, they overall really weren't that scary as they just used the same zombies from the start of the game. The only room that had anything somewhat nerve-wracking in it was the window where you could see the helipad, mainly due to the dogs earlier, so I was a bit anxious as I looked through it and was heading to leave the room that something might jump in through it. Final area of the game just doesn't have anything new either mechanically or threat-wise, besides a zombie alternative. Speaking of the zombies, these guys are not that threatening at all. While being somewhat at the start of the game, they very quickly lose any eeriness or scare factor. Partially because of this introduction where they look kind of goofy and honestly made me laugh. That may be my horror coping mechanism though. They just seem to pose a very minimal threat overall. As Jill, I found the shotgun incredibly early, which can one-shot the zombies, making them disappear from the game completely. That just pretty much trivialized any fear factor that I could have had as they were so easy to defeat. There was a bit of nervousness initially due to the shotgun requiring me to be close to the zombies to kill them in a single shot. However, after I did it a couple times, the anxiety I had from that dissipated. Now, this could be countered by the amount of ammo that you find. However, I could find about 14 shells before I even used up the first 7, where I may have missed one trying to escape the death trap after obtaining it. Now, I was using the ammo very conservatively, so maybe some people may use more of it, but I only used it when it felt impossible to bypass the zombies without getting eaten, which only occurred in the tightest of corridors. I also just used it when I got sick of dodging these guys. It's incredibly easy to get past these guys. They're incredibly slow and you can outrun them with absolutely no struggle at all. It's not like they're only slightly slower, so then at least when I stopped, I didn't have much time before I would have had to keep running. They pretty much reluctantly totaled over to me, making them impossible to not outpace easily. It was also just really weird. Sometimes they'll just walk somewhat aimlessly, even though they were trying to attack me, which just made them seem fairly pathetic, especially when I can just run right past them with no issue as long as they weren't facing directly at me. While that is good from a gameplay point of view, it really helped cement the zombies as just not a threat. Dogs, however, gave me Dark Souls flashbacks. The dogs genuinely did instill a lot of fear into me. They are fast and actually kept up with your pace, so it didn't feel like I could stop moving until I left the room or just pause, but let's not worry about that. When in locations with them, I either frantically tried to kill them, sorry Puppo, then I just ended up feeling really horrible for it, so I just didn't kill them at all, and then went into pure flight mode when around them, which made every time I saw a new room with them in it scary, scary. That was until I started to realize something. As I encountered them more often and got accidentally hit by them, I realized they kind of don't do that much damage. Felt like the zombies could either 1 to 3 shot me throughout pretty much the entire game. The dogs only seem to do about a third of that, and I believe they take like 9 hits at full health to actually kill you. Yeah, after I discovered that, they pretty much lost all fright I had for them. The dogs in Dark Souls are more powerful, I think. I also unfortunately started to notice that they were also kind of dumb. I found that they really struggled actually attacking me if I was staying still because I wanted to die, because this game has no quit out to menu option. That was a bit annoying. So that's 2 major enemies in the game which just aren't threats. The third major enemy, and if you disagree that it isn't the third major enemy, that is fine. This is my talk though, so shush. Play the recreation of my reaction. Whoa, these guys look awesome. Yeah, I wasn't scared of them at all. I feel like not seeing them in this introductory thing would have been more effective, as it would have been harder to get a proper look at them without dying in the process, thereby making me more scared of them by default. But having a good look at them before makes me think that these guys look like Zelda enemies, which the zombies never did. Okay, just not with the Resident Evil design. This is a bit of a shame that any fear of these guys pretty much got obliterated instantly, as they by far have the best AI. It's not really that high of a bar though. I actually found it quite hard to avoid their main stab attack. They get quite close and it's fairly quick. However, it is avoidable, it's just kind of difficult to do. They attack with their left claw, which makes it so if I timed it correctly and got towards their right side before the slice completely finished, I could leave unscathed. I feel like if I didn't get a good look at them right at the start, this would have been more nerve-wracking. They also have more than just one attack and a really fast move speed. They can pretty much leap at you, which would have been very scary because while in the air, they have significantly harder to hit. I had trouble killing this one guy because of it. They also seem to take 3 hits from the shotgun, making them more of a threat. However, I found that the grenade launcher one-shot them, which sort of eliminated anything I could have had during combat. They also seem to have the same damage as the dogs, which just made them even less scary. I feel like if they had a less cool design and they also didn't get a proper introduction, they would have frightened me for way longer than literally no time at all. This game also does have more minor enemies around. However, besides snakes falling from the trees, none of them gave me that much of a fright at all. Snakes can barely move, so they were unfrightening. The sharks, do I really need to say why the sharks pose literally no threat? The big spiders were kind of unnerving. I live in Australia and spiders kill you here. Apparently, I've never really heard of a spider-related death. I was actually really scared of a big spider in the sewers initially, like most of what I believe are the bosses or just large encounters. Everyone except the snake rematch actually had me quite nervous during the encounter. However, that initial fright is very quickly mitigated after the second visit. I knew that they were there and I pretty much just stood in one spot and fired a weapon at them. Usually the grenade launcher, until they died, and that worked pretty much perfectly whenever I did it. They really aren't that challenging. The only issue I had with this strategy is that the spider poisoned me. However, in the safe room, I found pretty much immediately afterwards there was a blue herb and a first aid spray, which kind of made any tenseness I might have had after the fight dissipate. Overall, the amount of healing in this game is a bit too much in my option. Now, I was playing as Jill who gets infinite saves if it's her first playthrough, but I can't imagine them being very scarce on a playthrough with limited saves. It really isn't that hard to get past enemies consistently. Only very few times I ended up actually using any healing. I think I might have maybe used like 7 or 8 herbs the entire playthrough and 2 first aid sprays, and that's including the non-healing ones. I feel like the enemies in combat just don't make the experience that much scary overall. They just aren't really that much of a threat though, either through their speed or their attack damage, which is incredibly underwhelming. I feel like whenever I see a threat, I should be quite nervous, more like how I feel in some of these environments for the first time. The environments in this game are pre-rendered, which, while making them day-to-day, I kinda like, and I think they worked better horror-wise than if they were rendered in real time. The environments being pre-rendered allowed each room to have more detail, which is honestly quite off-putting in context with your character. The added detail also makes some rooms such as the night room a lot more just ominous. Whilst I was sure they wouldn't move as they were pre-rendered, there was just something about that set which just made me incredibly unnerved whilst I was doing the puzzle inside of it. I honestly feel like it wouldn't have been as nerve-wracking with a lower polygon model and textures that would have been required otherwise. I personally can't imagine it looking scarier. I do feel the environments are a bit bright though a lot of the time. Of course I'd like to see, but I guess giving off more of a haunted feeling with the lighting would have helped make each of the rooms more ominous compared to how bright some of these are. It just feels a bit inappropriate. The sound design is really good though. They somehow make both music and silence incredibly nerve-wracking at all times nearly. When your music inside the mansion just cuts off in a new room and all you can hear is footsteps, it's just incredibly unnerving. Even when the music comes on, it can instill quite a bit of paranoia in me if there was a long stretch of silence beforehand. It did really make things feel more uncertain. The effect, however, drained the more it went on. Whilst I did get that tense feeling in my chest, wherever that would be, my brain was not really frightened at the end game, which was not helped by the quality of the voice acting throughout the game. The voice acting could also be significantly better.
Now I've done it. Sorry, Jill. Wait. I'll go and get another rope.
It is honestly way too poor, as any scene with dialogue sort of ruined the tone and atmosphere. It most likely has to do with both poor direction and possibly not that great of acting. If they had like a little bit more direction, I feel like that for the most part, aside from some lines which aren't that great in my opinion, it would have helped make the game not more scary, just not less scary. I finally want to touch upon how underwhelming that final area was. The most scared I got was when I just didn't expect a zombie just out of frame, as mentioned earlier. After this long of a time playing the game, a lot of the horror aspects have kind of worn off on me. I wasn't really that scared of what the game showed me. The most nervous I got was running through the engine room, and even then it wasn't really that much. They also introduced this new enemy who I don't even really know how they behave, besides they can crawl in ceilings in this one area. They are way too underutilized. One thing that could have been scary was how the new zombies respawned. The only thing is that they pretty much have the same AI as the regular zombies. They go down in the exact same way as them, and I could pretty much re-say everything I said about the regular zombies compared to these new guys, but add the fact that there are like only 4 of them that respawn. They're just more annoying than scary. The final counter, at least on my playthrough, where I saved Chris and Barry died, rest in peace, there wasn't even like that tense of a climax. It was just a big man who died in 3 grenades who walked incredibly slowly. Why should have I feared him? Because he killed the twist villain, what's his name? Who I already guessed was the twist villain, and he wasn't even that threatening and died in what felt like a pretty cliche way. The predictability was just not helpful in making me fear this thing. In the ending I got to the game, the escape sequence wasn't even a proper escape sequence. You just go back up the lab with no threats aside from the boiler room guys being where the new zombies were, and a small horde of regular zombies near the entrance. But neither really scared me. The overall effect of the horror elements had worn off by this point. Now in the best ending where you don't get Barry dead, I was sad about that, there is more tension with the lab going in a self-destruct sequence, but I didn't get to that, so it was underwhelming, which honestly, I feel like the worst ending should be more tension-filled due to the more dire scenario and the worst things happening. Now, was Resident Evil scary? Well, it's like a cubic graph of scariness, where it starts out scary, then dips, then rises again, and then just decreases until the end of time, or in this case, until the game ends. It's not a perfect analogy, but shush. Whilst the occasions and atmosphere can be unnerving, and the fear of the unknown is initially used to great success, it slowly then abruptly faded with the not very scary enemies and the fear of the unknown dissipating. You still play the game though, it's pretty fun.